First part of this video is going to discuss how this bill will impact the LGBTQ plus community. The end part will discuss how it's going to impact the non-LGBTQ plus community. HB 1361 is a bill that tells schools you are not allowed to recognize a student's identity if it does not match the sex on their paperwork. The bill prohibits school personnel and students from requesting or using certain pronouns or alternate names in school settings. It is framed as a matter of definitions and procedures, but its purpose is unmistakable: to restrict how transgender and non-binary students are addressed, recognized, and affirmed. This is not a small administrative rule. This is a law about who is allowed to exist as themselves in Oklahoma classrooms. HB 1361 does three things. It bans teachers from using a student's pronouns or chosen name unless it matches their sex assigned at birth. It bans students from using each other's pronouns and chosen names in the same way. And it creates an environment where any deviation from birth-assigned identity is treated as a violation. There is no exception for parental consent, medical documentation, mental health recommendations, safety concerns, or students' well-being. The bill is absolute. It is designed to eliminate recognition of transgender and non-binary identities in school. Supporters of bills like HB 1361 often claim that they are about clarity, consistency, or protecting teachers. But pronoun bans are not neutral, they are targeted. Pronouns are not grammar, pronouns are identity. When the state bans pronouns, it is banning recognition of the people who use them. HB 1361 is not about language, it is about control. Transgender and non-binary students already face higher rates of bullying, depression, anxiety, family rejection, and suicide attempts. Affirming pronouns are one of the strongest protective factors for LGBTQ plus youth. Research shows that when a trans student's pronouns are respected, their risk of suicide drops dramatically. HB 1361 removes that protection. It forces teachers to misgender students. It forces students to misgender each other. It forces trans youth to hear every single day that the law does not allow them to be who they are. This is not a policy disagreement. This is a psychological harm codified into law. LGBTQ plus teachers already navigate fear of being outed, fear of discrimination, fear of retaliation, and losing their job. HB 1361 intensifies that fear, because if a teacher uses a student's pronouns, they can be punished. If a teacher uses their own pronouns, they may be targeted. If a teacher acknowledges LGBTQ plus identity at all, they risk violating the bill's intent. HB 1361 creates a chilling effect where LGBTQ plus teachers must hide who they are to survive professionally. A school is not just a building, it is a social ecosystem. HB 1361 disrupts that ecosystem by encouraging students to police each other's identities, empowering bullies to use the law as a weapon, forcing teachers into adversarial roles, undermining trust between students and staff, and creating confusion and fear around basic communication. When identity becomes illegal, safety becomes impossible. Families who support their transgender or non-binary children will face schools refusing to use their child's name, teachers forced to misgender their child, administrators citing state law to override parental wishes. increased conflict between home and school, emotional harm to their child that the family cannot prevent. HB 1361 positions the state between parents and their children, dictating how families are allowed to support their own kids. Misgendering is not harmless. It is not a difference of opinion, and it is not a debate. Misgendering is a form of psychological violence. HB 1361 mandates misgendering. It requires it. It enforces it. For LGBTQ plus youth, this means increased depression, anxiety, self-harm risk, suicidal ideation, school avoidance, and increased dropped out rates. The bill does not protect students. It endangers them. When the state signals that transgender identities are not legitimate, students receive the message to HB 1361 will embolden bullies, increase harassment, increase physical violence, increase social isolation, decrease reporting of abuse, and decrease the trust in school staff. Because why would a trans student report bullying to a teacher who is legally required to misgender them? HB 1361 destroys the foundation of safety that schools are supposed to provide. Students cannot learn when they are anxious, unsafe, invalidated, humiliated, and erased. HB 1361 creates an environment where LGBTQ plus students are focused on survival, not education. It also harms non-LGBTQ students by reducing empathy, normalizing discrimination, teaching intolerance, undermining critical thinking, and weakening social emotional learning. A school that cannot respect its students cannot educate them. HB 1361 raises serious concerns. It conflicts with federal Title IX interpretations regarding gender identity. It exposes schools to lawsuits from families of LGBTQ plus students. It forces teachers to violate professional ethics, and it undermines district policies designed to protect vulnerable youth. The bill places educators in an impossible position: obey state law or protect their students. HB 1361 is not an isolated bill. It is part of a larger legislative pattern that includes bans on pride recognition, HB 1219 that we went over, bans on birth certificate changes, HB 1225, bans on DEI in higher education, HB 1289, restrictions on gender-affirming care, restrictions on LGBTQ plus curriculum, and restrictions on LGBTQ plus visibility in public institutions. HB 1361 is the school-based identity erasure component of this pattern. It targets the youngest, most vulnerable members of the LGBTQ plus community. HB 1361 is not about pronouns. It is about power. It is about who gets to define identity, who gets to be recognized, who gets to be safe, and who gets to belong. HB 1361 tells LGBTQ plus students, you are not allowed to exist as yourself in this school. It tells LGBTQ plus teachers, you must hide who you are to keep your job. It tells families, your support for your child does not matter here. And it tells the entire state, identity is not a personal truth, it is a political background. HB 1361 is not a bill about language, it is a bill about erasure. And the people who feel its impact most deeply are the ones that it refuses to name. Now, HB 1361 affects non-LGBT students as well. Nicknames become legally complicated. Schools routinely use nicknames. Robert to Bobby, Melissa to Missy, Jonathan to John, Abigail to Abby, Christopher to Chris. Under HB 1361, these are alternative names. The bill prohibits school personnel and students from using alternative names in certain situations without parental permission. This means a teacher may not be allowed to call Robert Bobby unless a parent signs a permission form. A student may not be allowed to call their friend Melissa Missy unless Melissa's parents sign a permission form. A substitute teacher could face discipline for using a nickname that appears on a seating chart but not on the birth certificate. This creates a bureaucratic burden for something as simple as calling a kid by the name that they prefer. Students with common or cultural name variations are affected. Many students use anglicized names, shortened names, middle names, cultural nicknames, and family-only names. HB 1361 treats all of these as alternative names. A student named Jose who goes by Joey, or a student named Maylene who goes by May, would need parental permission for teachers or peers to use those names. Students with divorced or blended families are caught in the middle. Children who use a step-parent's last name, a hyphenated name, a preferred family nickname, may not be able to use those names at school without formal documentation. This can create conflict between parents, especially in custody situations. Students who use middle names for safety or privacy lose that option. Some students use a middle name because they share a name with a parent. They dislike their first name. They have a traumatic association with their legal name. HB 1361 makes that difficult or impossible. Teachers must police names. Teachers will be required to verify every nickname, confirm parental permission, avoid using any alternative name unless documented, and correct students who use nicknames for each other. This turns normal classroom interaction into a complicated exercise. And teachers risk discipline for innocent mistakes. The bill allows disciplinary action for violations. That means a teacher who calls William Will could be reported. A coach who calls Samantha Sam could face consequences. A librarian who writes Liz on a reading log instead of Elizabeth could be accused of violating the law. The bill creates fear around everyday language. Staff loses autonomy in building rapport. Nicknames are part of relationship building. HB 1361 restricts that, making classrooms feel colder and more formal. Teachers must misname students even when it harms them. If a student prefers a nickname for personal, emotional, or cultural reasons, teachers may be forced to ignore that preference unless the correct paperwork is filed. This undermines trust and damages students-teachers relationship. HB 1361 affects school culture as a whole. It creates a surveillance environment. Students will be encouraged, explicitly or implicitly, to report each other for using the wrong name. This increases bullying, social policing, tension between peers, and fear of making mistakes. It disrupts normal communication. Students naturally use nicknames for each other. HB 1361 forces them to second-guess every interaction. It increases administrative burden because schools will need permission forms, tracking systems, enforcement procedures, and disciplinary processes, all for something as simple as calling Robert Bobby. It harms students who are not LGBTQ, but who simply prefer a different name. The bill does not distinguish between a trans student using a gender-affirming name or a cis student using a nickname. Both are treated as alternative names. HB 1361 is written broadly enough that it reshapes the entire school environment. It forces everyone, students, and staff to treat names and pronouns as legal liabilities rather than normal parts of communication. The bill's real target is transgender students, but its collateral damage includes every student who uses a nickname, every teacher who uses informal names, every family with cultural name practices, every student who prefers their middle name, every staff member who wants to build rapport, every peer who wants to call their friend by the name that they actually use. HB 1361 doesn't just regulate identity, it regulates language itself. And when a law controls language, that changes the culture of the school for everyone.